Hi there. Hi there.
Hi there.
It is December. It's almost 2023. Does that seem real to you?
Uh, well, as you get older, Tricia, the years go by faster. So I'm almost getting used to how fast the years go by. But yeah, it seems like it was the first of the year yesterday. I mean,
I know.
this one has gone by particularly fast. Yeah.
You'll appreciate this. Well, I went to New Zealand. I was like, should I dye my hair before I go? And so I was like asking my husband, I'm like, do I look old? And I said, should I dye my hair? And he goes, I don't care. And I'm like, well, that's not a very good answer. Let me fish for a better one. So I asked again, I'm like, do I look old? He goes, Tricia, you don't look old. You are old. I'm like, that's mean.
Not the right answer.
But that's what I get for fishing. That's what I get. Like I was, it's I walked right into it.
Oh,
Hey
funny.
Zach's online. And I appreciate the comment, Zach. That's a nice comment. But
Yeah.
hi Zach, welcome. So today, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about, inspired by the season and the desire for that folks have, and some are able to fulfill, which is getting together with friends and family, either created family or family of origin. I hope that folks that aren't able to do that are still looking for maybe some Zoom calls or some other ways of getting together. That as we were talking earlier, that caused us to look into this coming year and think about, what kinds of get-togethers, what kinds of communities do we want to build for ourselves in the coming year, and what purpose does that serve? Why are humans drawn to community? And it doesn't matter whether we're introverts or extroverts or whatever. Everybody has their own idea of the ideal community. And so, how do we fulfill that social need? We're basically just bees or ants. I don't know. We're just
Well, I hate that
or herd
like,
creatures,
don't
maybe.
like people. Like I
Yeah.
can't stand that. I mean, granted, I'm an extreme extrovert. I get it. But like that sentiment that introverts are like, no, they just get energy different and they don't necessarily want to be around a ton. They still like people. Like if you don't like people, that's a whole different word. Like,
Yeah.
it's a different dynamic with it. And so we're going to be doing these once a month. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to be like consistent about it just with Diana's schedule, with my schedule. We've got to kind of like, what's your availability? And then we find a date and we make it work. But once a month, we're going to be coming on, and it's all tied to our book that was released last year called Lead Without Blame. And so just topics that we want to bring to you and talk through. And honestly, a little selfishly, we even had this today when we were getting on before this. I'm like, I don't like not talking to Diana every single week. I'm like speaking of community, right? I'm having withdrawal.
Yes.
From all the time that we spent in writing the book and stuff. And I was like, no, I don't like this going multiple weeks without catching up.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It feels like after. Do you remember? Speaking of community, do you remember when your school days? You went to September through June, school days, and then college, school days, and then you're in your mid-20s, and September rolls around, and you're kind of like, isn't there something I'm supposed to be doing? Isn't there some new group of people I'm supposed to be meeting this time of year? Isn't there an assignment due or something like that? It took me years to get over that feeling, and I think it's part of that kind of, we're just so socialized to having friends and family around and coworkers and so on. Yeah.
So what
And
are some
communities of practice, people who like this, have similar interests to us. Yeah.
Well, let's build on that, because what are some of the ways that communities are helpful for you? Like why do you seek them out? Like what's the benefit for you?
Wow. I have a very different opinion about that now than I would have a number of years ago. But looking back, now that I can look back over some time in my career, community is how I've built my career. I mean, having a community of practice to contribute to, either in helping to organize events or leadership roles or those kinds of things, or to be writing for, knowing kind of who that audience is, that community of people that I kind of keep in mind when I'm writing. It's been I mean, I hope I have contributed back a lot, and I think I have. I've contributed back, but not nearly as much as I've gotten from it. I mean, I don't think I would be where I mean,
I feel the same way.
The Agile Retrospectives book.
Great book.
I connected with Esther through community to write that book. And how influential has that been in my life? So yeah, it's just been huge. It's been huge for me. And I miss it. I miss it.
Yeah. I think where it's helped me a lot, I mean, being an extreme extrovert, there's always just like, I get energy from it, right? I get, some of it's just the laughter and the smiling and like the reconnecting and then feeling part of something, right? And I think for me also, it's the support in that community, like to be challenged, not just, smoke, right? But to be challenged, to think through things, to be lifted up. When someone is saying, just tell yourself you're sensational because you are, right? Or Zach, who's like absolute bomb. And I'm like, nah, but that's part of that, remembering what you are contributing back to communities and what they're contributing to you, right? And so for me, in a lot of ways, it's an energy driving support, because I get energy by helping others. I get energy by dancing, right? But by laughter and by connection. But I also get energy just by somebody being present with me when I'm really down, or saying it's going to be okay, and reminding me and refusing to let me not see my value, right? Like, and those things. And so I find it's across the spectrum, but I'm an extreme, people person most of the time. Sometimes I don't like people, I'll be honest, right? Sometimes people, but most of the time it is something that just gives me energy.
Yeah, well, and I think there's something that you said there that's really important in terms of community, is that, if we only have a couple of family members or one or two friends or whatever, and one of them is missing, and we encounter a problem, who's there for us to draw on? Who is in our friendship circle, our colleague? So many of my colleagues have become friends. I need a whole new word for, a frolic or something. I don't know. but that somebody told me one time, everyone needs at least 3 people they could call in an emergency at 3:00 in the morning, and that said that person will be there for them, either just to talk them through it, or to actually come and show up. And I feel like community is where we find those people, those people who become really the friends of our heart, and that we become really close to. But then it's also useful to just have that. And useful isn't quite the right word, but it's also beneficial to have that even bigger network of folks. I think about LinkedIn, and how they say, now don't you connect with anybody that you don't know in person. And I just roll my eyes, because there's so many people I've connected with just because we're both in the Agile community, or we're both in the organization design community, or, some of my areas of interest. And I've read their things. I see that they're just starting out and might need the boost of having a, a connection to a broader network, or those kinds of things. I mean, there are just so many ways. The internet has given us even more ways to build community, which, as much as I sometimes rail against the bad parts of the internet, I have to admit, there are a lot of good things, and that's one of them.
I will get on Twitter just to see a Michelle Slager post. Like, I will, like, because it's where she is. It's an interesting play on that, because I do think it can be a little intimidating to people, right? Like, in terms of, well, how much do I have to do? How do you keep those engagements? And I think it's an interesting thing, because there are certain engagements and there are certain communities that I do spend a lot of time in, right? Like, I do invest a lot of time in doing things. And then there's other communities where I see, there are people in the agile community. We're lucky on non-COVID years to see each other once a year in person, right? And yet, when there are shared values and there are shared like goals and purpose that we're doing, we go super deep really, really quickly in certain communities, where it doesn't mean frequency where you have to talk to the person nonstop to really feel a sense of belonging in a community and a sense of engagement and support and get all the benefits. Like, there are people that I, do hear from like once a year, but the instant I hear from them, like, we're right back where we left off. And for me, that's pure connection, right? Like, that's where it isn't a surface, it's deep, and it doesn't require frequency. And so for me, with my lifestyle and travel and just how much trainings I do and things like that, it's really hard for me to constantly reach out. Like, I went for a walk the other day and I like tried to call all my girlfriends. Like, I was like, okay, I'm on my walk, who's available, right? But and it kind of stinks when you went from a time in your life where you talked to that person every single day. Like, I drove home every single day and had a conversation, to now like squeezing in between motherhood and being a wife and being a professional. But I think the coolest communities are the ones that support that, like actually understand that dynamic and still can go right in. And like, if there was somebody that contacted me I haven't heard from a year, there are times I'll get a text from somebody like, hi. And I'm like, how you doing? Yeah. Is something up, right? And I can go right there, because as Guillaume kind of says, I get energized by actually helping somebody else too. So it never bothers me. And I like that dynamic, where I think I even feel proud that I know and others know that connection's there, no matter what the frequency is.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and to go on to the other part that we were going to be talking about what are our intentions about community for 2023. I have a really big one there, because James Shore, who's been my business partner for the past several years, and I have decided to close the Agile Fluency Project as a business and work at continuing it as a community of practice of people who are just interested in the Agile Fluency model and so on. And so I am sort of thinking about, and we'll probably next week start planning for, what are the ways that I can not be in a leadership role in that community, because that's not what's going to happen. I'm leaving the Agile Fluency Project for a reason, but to be a good member of that community and a contributor there, and what can I do as a member to help that community connect and grow and thrive. And so I'm really thinking a lot about intentions around community at this point. And what does it mean to be? I mean, I don't really want the role of community manager. I'm not even really clear what that is. Although I do know some people have that as their job, and good on you. I'm glad people out there knowing how to learn more how to do that. But I may be drawing on your expertise later.
Reach out. Yeah. Speaking of community, reach out.
Yes. But
what are ways that you can?
I think that then I also think about what are the communities that during the pandemic I've begun losing touch with, and which ones do I want to kind of revive that connection and make it more present and vital for me.
So how would you go about, what are ways that you go about reviving connections or starting connections or reviving them or maintaining them?
Well, one is serendipity. I'm fortunate enough that I have a pretty big connective network on LinkedIn, and every so often I'll be, sending a message to somebody or that, and somehow or another, some person that I haven't connected with in years will come into my vision, as a connection. I'll see them in a sidebar or something, and I'll think, wow, I wonder how they're doing. And so I will send them a message, and a lot of times I don't always get something back. I don't know what's happened to them or why their LinkedIn profile is still up there. Some of them are older folks, so I'm a little worried about that. But just, reaching out and saying, hey, we've lost touch, but I'm still interested in knowing how you're doing. And so that's one way. And that's kind of a serendipity thing. I just sort of wait for that person to sort of show up.
In your universe and your
because it's somebody I worked with 10 years ago at some company that I haven't been back to in ages, or, those kinds of things. That is what I think LinkedIn is really good for, actually, is keeping track of that sort of thing. And then that sometimes I get reminded of sort of the meetups, community of practice, the user group kind of things that I have been part of in the past, or friendship groups that I have been part of in the past. And, just for whatever reason, stopped being really present in my daily life. And, which of those would I like to get back in touch with? There's several women's groups that, we were a support group for some period of time, and then for whatever reason we disbanded, and then we all went off and did our lives, not intending to never get together again. But, that's what happens if you don't have it on your calendar, right? So, so those kinds of things. I just got a Christmas card from a woman that I was in a crafting group with. And, bless her heart, she's been the person who has continued to reach out. And I'm really looking forward in this year to seeing if we can't start doing some more crafting together. Just once or twice a month, get together for a couple hours and just sit and talk and work on a project. Sometimes that's the only way I make progress on my projects.
My only crafting is crocheting. That's it. And I really only do hats. Like, that's the extent of it. And so Pete gets really annoyed because he's like, oh, great, crocheting season again.
Yeah. But there's all kinds of things like that in our lives that we let go. But those folks that we valued can still be parts of our community if we think to reach out to them.
Yeah.
So
like, the email and the text and things along those lines, they're the easiest ones for me. I have started, and maybe it's social media that's gotten this into my habit or whatnot. It's like, I like getting little notes. Like, I had somebody who just left their job and is starting a new job, and they're so excited. And they just sent me a quick text about that. And I was like, that's like, for me, that it's almost like the daily scrum, right? Like give me the quick update, like give me a quick highlight. And I actually just sent it out to a bunch of people yesterday, to a number of people that I was like, my daughter passed her driver's test. Like, and I just sent it to a number of people, and there's no other context. It wasn't like a letter, like, hi, how are you? Right. But for me, it is that kind of like, I'm super happy and I want to share it. Right. And so, but they do feel a little bit like tweets or just social media posts, like just a quick highlight. I haven't gone so far, just send random photos to people, but that could be on the horizon. I'm not opposed to it.
right.
But but then there are other things that I start trying to go, is there a time where I want to do a weekend retreat and just get away and to think about those things. Somebody just came into town and she coordinated a bunch of us getting together for happy hour. And it's like all of us live here and didn't get together. And yet she came into town and we all like instantly got together. And sometimes it's just thinking about in advance a little bit about what's your availability. And traveling was a nice crutch for me because every time I travel, I'm like, okay, I want to see this person. I want like, and it forces that versus when I'm at home, I'm like, suddenly the days are just flying by and it's the end of 2022. And so I try and get a little bit more intentional about the activities and the events that I'm doing. Although when I go to a brand new event, I'm trying to join this like leadership group and trying to get more communities in leadership and because those are all more ad hoc and local here in the Denver area for me. And I always have to remind myself, this is one of the things like when I am trying to branch out or meet new people, I don't have to like everybody in that community, right? Like, and there is generally like, I like, can I find one person? Like I joined, this is horrible. I can't even believe I'm going to admit this. When I joined a mom group, when I first had Sean, it was not like, I was like, what, this is, I should be a mom. Like it was like, I don't relate to any of these people. Like I was just like losing my mind. And then I found one of my best friends to this day, Leah, and so there's a little bit when I'm reaching out to a new community, reminding myself that you're not trying to find 20 new best friends. Wow. You're, sometimes it's just finding that one person you connect with, and then that builds the community from there. It's not a instant level for everybody at all one time. And so if I remind myself, I'm just looking for one person that I make some kind of connection, that I enjoy the conversation, then that bigger community starts to build from that instead of trying to go in and go instantly like, well, everybody else is talking to each other and I don't know anybody. I'm like, it can be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's a whole skill set, entering new groups. And everyone needs to find their level of comfort around that. I do not think of myself. I'm a good at connecting people, and I like connecting with people, but I'm not a networker. I mean, I don't know how to go into a group and kind of do that networking. Hi, I'm so, I don't know. So I've had to kind of learn some ways of entering a new group, making myself feel more comfort there so that I can then start reaching out and talking to people and so on. And that's a whole skill set to learn, particularly if it's a professional community maybe that you've never been to. And so there's a certain amount of, you don't want to come across as a wacky new person. You want to, at least now I'm talking about myself, right? I want to come across as someone that these people are going to take seriously as a professional, but also stay in my own authenticity, my own integrity. And so figuring out what is that? There's a certain amount of image management, if you will, that we all need to do to try to help ourselves show up as ourselves in the way we want to show up. And
so that it does feel like a community and not just a random group of people you're standing in the middle of.
That's right. And then, then the community can develop around that, all knowing who you are, right? I can remember back early on when I entered some groups thinking I needed to be a certain kind of person to be in that group. And so showing up that way, and then realizing I was going to have to maintain that, which started feeling like a lot of work. And I ended up leaving those groups, right? Because it really wasn't, I couldn't really be myself there because I hadn't introduced myself as myself there. To one extent, and to another extent, they had just very different expectations for who their members would be. but still, that was, I wouldn't say that was a regret. I mean, I learned a lot from doing that, but I do things differently now. I do things differently now.
Well, we hope that you find in 2023 the communities that will lift you, support you, energize you, help you, and that you can help in return as we're doing these. People will often say, like, well, in the workplace, we don't have to, have relationships and things. It's like, no, you do have to have a sense of connection and community, because that's how you collaborate. That's how you build trust. That's how you engage, and keeping everybody kind of at that arm's length means, to Diana's point, you don't really see you. And if we're going to be knowledge workers and bringing our best creativity, you gotta see me, right? And being part of that.
That's interesting, because that kind of bleeds over into some of the topics in our book. But I just thought about how much the community and the relationships help when you need to give somebody feedback. Mm-hmm. I mean, my very best go-to thing when I really need to give somebody feedback, whether it's feedback to encourage their behavior or feedback to discourage some of their behavior, is to be able to say to them sincerely, I really want to have a good working relationship with you.
I want you to succeed.
We're in this organization, this endeavor together, and I want us to have a good working relationship. And so here's something I'd like to talk to you about, right? That phrase, that I want to have a good working relationship with you, delivered sincerely within a community, a work community, a volunteer community, or whatever, just is magical. I mean, it really sets a tone that makes such a huge difference. And it is about, we have a little part in this bigger community, and let's make sure our part is a good part.
Yeah. Well, it's really understanding, and as a reactionary, your brain defensively, right? It's understanding that person does have your best interest. Like, they are rooting for you and supporting you, and that it isn't malicious or weaponized in those ways. And it can make a huge, huge difference. So thank you for being part of one of my communities and our communities. And as we build, like, Lead Without Blame community, and as we go forward, we hope that you're able to keep joining us for these. Diana, say something insightful while I look at what the next date is. Nothing.
Something insightful is that we actually have a website, leadwithoutblame.com. And while we each have our own websites as well, you can always connect to us there, and you can find out information about the book and so
on. Perfect. And our next one is going to be on January 20th at 10 a.m. Mountain Time again. So that's when we'll be tuning back in. The next live will be January 20th, where Diana and I will come back on live for everybody. So have a wonderful end of the year. Happy holidays to everybody. And we'll see you in 2023.